Welcome to Adventures of Alice and Bob, the podcast where we get root access to the people shaping the world of cybersecurity today and find out a little bit about their journey, the events that have shaped their career, and what still keeps them up at night. Joining me for today's special episode is my partner in crime and co-host, Marc Mayfrey. How are you doing today, Marc?
I am all right, dude. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, in the past, we've had guests on representing colleges, corporations, charities, and consultancies. But I think, Marc, this is the first time we've had a town actually represented on the podcast. And not just any town, the town of Truckee in California, located in the Sierra Nevada range, just 20 minutes away from Lake Tahoe. It's a vibrant mountain town, probably best known for its outdoor activities and seemingly producing a lot of the downhill ski champions that we see in the world today. But in 2021, things changed for them when they were hit by a major ransomware attack. Our guests today were at the heart of that incident, responding to the attack and the 6 months response and remediation effort that followed it. They've kindly joined us today to share a little bit of their experience and their story. So welcome Chris Hardy, Chief Information Technology and Security Officer, and Logan McDonald, IT System Analyst for the Town of Truckee, California. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
What's up, guys?
What's up?
Before we dive into the ransomware attack, I think it'd be great for our audience to find out a little bit more about your background. So, Chris, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. How did you first become interested in technology, and how did you find yourself working for the Town of Truckee?
Yeah, so I was getting my undergrad at Sac State, and I was going business and decided to land on management information systems. And at the time, I was building gaming computers and stuff for other people and was kind of interested in going IT long term. But truthfully, I didn't know that there was going to be a lot of breadth and career choices in IT, because I felt like my generation was getting to the point where we were really good with that kind of stuff. But obviously, I honed in on it and throughout the years learned that it is just such a wide field. There's so much that you can focus on and so many things to learn. So I got my undergrad. I ended up being a consultant for a while and then worked for a large biotechnology company, building like custom apps and doing a lot of DBA type things. And then really the bulk of my career was spent, in 911, police and fire. I was an analyst that deployed and project managed like a 911 phone system, mugshot systems, body cams, proximity dispatching, that kind of thing. And it was really rewarding. I really loved it and did that for about 8 years and then went on to management. And a lot of what I learned in public safety translates to cybersecurity because we have so many compliance goals. So really started focusing on cybersecurity, got my master's in cybersecurity. And then, my dad lives in this area. I really wanted to get to the Tahoe Basin. And when I saw this job come up, knowing that the town had been recently breached, I applied, and it was kind of my dream job. And I had a boss at the time that told me, when you want something, you really go for it. Don't go for things that you don't want. And so I watched every council session I could get my hands on. I did a ton of research, brought a packet to my interview, and tried to really understand what the community's goals were and what the goals were for recovery. And I've been here for 2 years, and it's been fabulous. And I have awesome people on my team like Logan here who help kind of bring me into the fold and who I'd already done a ton of work towards recovery. And I'm here today and a happy customer beyond trust, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, before we jump into kind of how Logan found himself there, I hear despite all this qualification and research that you did, your first day in the job, you actually came a little bit overdressed.
Yeah. So, my full title is Chief Information Technology and Security Officer. So in my head, that type of person would show up in a suit on the first day. And this being the town of Truckee, I quickly learned that may not always be a one-size-fits-all rule. So I showed up in a suit, and our town attorney, Andy, he politely pulled me aside and gave me one of these and said, if you could never do that again, that would be great. We don't dress like that here at the town of Truckee, and we really don't want you setting that standard. And So that was the last day I wore a suit to the town.
Fantastic. And Logan, what about you? How did you get interested in technology and find yourself in this role?
Yeah, so I really kind of like fell into it a little bit. So I graduated high school, and my plan after high school was I was going to go to school and be a civil engineer. So like a completely different career path. So I started school, and then in the meantime, I ended up getting a job as an IT technician, just kind of to make some money while I was going to school. So I worked for a HOA here in Truckee, which is like, it's one of the biggest HOAs in the United States. Tons of amenities that require, tech support and stuff like that. And I just worked as a technician. And as I gained experience doing that, I just kind of realized that actually maybe civil engineering isn't what I want to do, and maybe this is instead. And so I always had my eye kind of on working for the town, specifically after that, because I really wanted the chance to kind of do something that was, a little more public facing and have the opportunity to, make some changes in our community, maybe like that. And so I was always looking for a job here. And when the IT technician position came open here, I went for it and got it. And that was going great. And then, like we mentioned earlier a little bit, my career in security specifically really jump-started when we experienced the ransomware incident that we did in 2021. And we'll talk about that some more. So I've been here at the town now for a little over 4 years.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I know, Marc, we have got a lot of guests on here in the past who've come up through support desk, IT technician roles. And actually, and I know you've talked about this before, that's a great place to learn, where the bodies are buried, where the challenges are, what the impacts on customers are.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in security and just like you guys were describing, like the knowing not just like security and the technology, but like the business, like your actual customer. So just like you were chatting about, like researching the town, what do they care about? Because everything you got to kind of put in terms that like people care. Because the reality is, like, most organizations don't exist to do security, right? Minus maybe security companies themselves or stuff like that, right? And so you got to put it in ways that people understand. And I think kind of growing up or living the business or kind of getting to know the business in that way, there's many ways to get at it, right? But always a helpful thing for sure.
Yeah, so let's dive into the ransomware incident itself. And we really appreciate you guys being so transparent and sharing your learnings here, because often with these things, you see the news in the headline, but you don't really find out what's going on behind the scenes, the real people impacts to that, and, the lessons that can be learned from it. So if it's okay with you, we'll look at it in 3 different parts. We'll look at before the incident itself, and then the recovery process there. So if we start off with painting the before picture, Chris, what were you and Logan up to before this incident started?
So this is like the coolest part about the ransomware attack for me is that, Logan was here and got to see it from start to finish. Again, I was brought in as part of the recovery effort. So I came in roughly 6 months after remediation had already started. But Logan, was here and really got to see kind of the before state, the challenges with COVID, and then the ransomware attack during the pandemic. And was here to see some of the decision making that was made. He even detected a lot of things before things happened. So if you don't mind, I'd pass the ball to Logan, because it's really through his lens. I mean, he's fabulous, and he's done a really good job of trying to put this together.
Yeah. So Logan, what were you up to, and what were the early warning signs that started to tip you off to that something was happening there?
Yeah, well, Chris mentioned COVID a little bit. We were just kind of, by this time, we had kind of sorted things out, but really we were an organization that didn't have any real work from home policies, any real way for people to work remotely. So, and we were a team of 3 at the time. Our IT department was 3 people total. And so it was a huge challenge for us to get that up and running. And that happened all very quickly when things started to go down with COVID, but we finally settled into that. And then we just started to see some weird stuff happen in our environment. So I'll just kind of start from the beginning, because there were definitely a few red flags along the way before things really hit the fan. So starting off on March 2nd, Microsoft actually released some information about some 0 days that were being used by what they were attributing to the Hafnium threat actor group. They were using these to attack on-prem Exchange servers. And at the time, we had an on-prem Exchange server. So luckily, the IT supervisor at the time, which wasn't Chris, saw this advisory and saw the threat there. And so he actually assigned it to our IT systems analyst at the time. So not me, but the third person on our team, to go ahead and install the updates that were necessary to patch those vulnerabilities. So it wasn't a problem, right? Because this was very scary, like a public facing server, very easy to exploit. It was pretty bad. And so that person got that assignment. A couple hours went by. They were working on it. They got back to the two of us and said, yep, server's all good to go. We should be good to go. And so everyone just kind of took that and ran with it. We moved on with our day. But then a couple of weeks later, some workstations in our environment started throwing Microsoft Defender warnings saying that there was viruses on these computers. So not a good situation at all. And so we looked into these warnings a little bit. We actually engaged an outside vendor, and they took a look and said, oh yeah, this kind of looks like the viruses that were being used in relation to those Exchange attacks that people have been seeing. So that's, really when things started to get pretty serious. So at that point, I decided we had to do some investigating on that Exchange server, right? Because that just doesn't sound right. So we logged in. There was a tool that Microsoft came out with that was like the Have I Been Compromised tool, basically allowed you to check to see if you were having problems. And sure enough, it came back with big red letters saying, yep, it looks like there's evidence that, your Exchange server has been compromised. You need to look into this right now. And we just were so confused because we thought, well, we installed the patch. Everything should have been good to go, right? So we went and looked. Sure enough, that patch didn't get installed properly. So that just, the protection we thought was there just wasn't there at all. And so kept investigating a little bit. We logged into the Exchange admin center, and there was some web shell syntax in some of the URL fields that matched, things that people were seeing out in the wild for these kind of attacks. And so at that point, I just took all of that info, I bundled it up and reported it to that vendor and to my supervisor at the time. So pretty big evidence here that we had something really serious going on, and I was looking for direction, and the direction we got back was, well, let's remove that web shell syntax from the URL fields. Let's patch the server with that cumulative update for real. And then let's run Microsoft Safety Scanner on that server just to make sure everything is good. And so that's what I did. And everything came back clear. But, looking at this, that really wasn't enough, because at this point, someone had already been in there. They'd had time to really do a lot more damage than what we were looking at the time. So, but those were the steps we took, and we moved on from there.
What I always find it interesting, like what was the kind of life backdrop as you're going through this, right? Because one of the things I have some friends that work in like emergency services and that other things, and they're always telling me about stuff when emergencies come up, and you also have like life happening, right? I'm just curious, was it like I know that wasn't kind of at the point where things got extra hectic, so just kind of how are you feeling during that? Or it already sounds like you had kind of the somewhat nervousness, but you weren't quite there yet, right? So a good way to characterize, or like?
Yeah, like definitely nervous, but I just kind of going off of, because I'm an IT technician at the time, so I'm going off direction from other people that have decision-making power, and I was just doing the best I could, providing the information I could, and then I'd go home, and I had just gotten married at that point. Like we were probably less than a year married, and so I would just go home and be like, "You saw some crazy stuff today. I don't know,
crazy things." Yeah.
So you had newlywed, middle of a pandemic, this breaking out at the same time. I mean, fair play to you for doing these things. And I believe actually the day of the incident, you walked into the kind of thing that I think brings probably a lot of people in this industry out in cold sweats, which is the warning note saying, please don't turn computers on, please don't log in, please don't do these things. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that was like walking in that day.
Yeah, there was actually, like, before we even get to that point, there was like one other day where things started getting weird too. We saw, we came in one day and we had an engineering user report that, hey, I remoted into my computer this morning, like super early, which she does she's like the one person here that does work at 3 a.m. for some reason. And she logged in, and there was a police department user already logged in to her computer when she tried to remote into it. And so again, super weird. And I reported it to, my supervisor, and this time it was, okay, let's reset those 2 users' passwords. Let's monitor for any other weird stuff like that. But again, probably a lot more opportunity for us to have investigated that a lot further and really, dug deeper, because that was really serious. And then shortly after that is when we had the big day. I came in expecting to just do my normal work, crush some help desk tickets, and I walk up to my door and they're telling the IT technician not to log into his computer, which doesn't make any sense. And then that day, what was so funny about that day is I get to work and it was like a ghost town on our side of the building. And I was just like, okay, so I'm not allowed to log into my computer and no one is here. Like, what did I just walk into? And so I wandered around and I finally made it to the room that's our emergency operations center. And that's where all the chaos was happening. So I walked in, it was like...
Is that like a center just for, if you can say or not, but is that center just kind of for IT, or is that like kind of like a town thing, like an overall...
Yeah, our EOC can be activated for a fire. It could be for any emergency. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I was asking, I like it's the visual, right? Because I think a lot of times when people think about emergencies and other things, we think about things like fires and other stuff, and like cybersecurity is right up there, but it's not always on the same the same level sometimes at different places and stuff. So that's just super interesting to picture.
I think it's the most likely. Like, I think you should be practicing the EOC with cybersecurity events or technology disruptions in general, probably more than most things. One of the things I wanted to say that I just thought was really cool about Logan in general is like Logan is pretty meticulous and very cool, calm, casual. Like we could be going through just a nightmare scenario and Logan's like, just cool as a cucumber. And that's what I think is probably the best part about him. But in preparation for a presentation earlier and also this one, Logan had pretty much whiteboarded all the things that he's talking about today. And I just find it so impressive that him as a technician at the time had detected all these things. I mean, he had an analyst on his team. He had a senior supervisor with tons of experience. And Logan's the one really, he won't say it, but he's the one going to everybody, the consultants and everyone going, as a technician, this is not right. And I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've been a technician for a long time, and I find that to be like over and above what you would expect of your technician. And when he had mapped all this out on the board, it was just like, ouch, like this is the decisions made. Like, it was so clear, like along the way. And like, I think anybody with like a basic understanding of like cybersecurity background is like, at the point you start seeing detection on endpoints, the Exchange server is not the only thing you're patching. Like, you've got a bigger problem. They're pivoting and escalating like crazy. So there's a lot of lateral movement. Yeah.
No, and especially with that context, like you were saying, with the kind of role you used to previously do, Logan, on the I think on the security side, we're always hoping for that there's like the right people out there, and not just IT, but just across the business that are like of the kind of see something, say something mindset. And then obviously security, there's the second part of follow up from there. But yeah, without a doubt. And it seems like you've always had like this kind of like one of the things I always think that makes a great attribute for security people also is just curiosity. All the times that me and you have chatted, and when I got to really know you guys at one of our conferences, like it just seems like you're a curious person, and it's like not surprising to me, kind of your trajectory and what you're doing, like trying to understand things. So was there a part of you and I want to derail we'll get back to the kind of story from a timeline perspective, but yeah, what it sounds like there was stuff you were already kind of like trying to highlight and be curious. Like, was there kind of more that you were kind of like, how to put it? There's a part of me when I've been at a company running security, right? Not as a guy here now on the product side, but running security, a company, a rocket company, I won't name, that kind of thing. And you're there and it's like, you don't want the bad thing to happen, right? But it's not exciting at the same time. I mean, it is an interesting, you know what I mean?
Was it a rush?
So,
yeah.
It's an interesting balance because the there is something to the cat and mouse game of it all that is just like intellectually curious and interesting. So, but yeah, maybe take us back. So it sounds like you're rolling in that day. You rolling in with your like Starbucks or something, and like what the F's going on? I mean,
Cup of coffee, no idea what's going
you know,
on.
you weren't in a suit. We know that.
I was rocking my nicest flannel for the day, you know, and so I got there and I pretty much just found my boss at the time and was kind of like, what's going on? And he's like, we had a ransomware attack. And so they immediately pulled up the ransom note to show me, because basically at the point that I got there, everything had been encrypted and there were ransom notes on every folder path, pretty much on every device. So they pulled one up to show me, and it was hilarious, because it was basically like contact info and FAQ for like what to do next, which was basically contact them if you don't want all your stuff, gone forever. And at the very bottom, it said protect your systems, amigo, because we were dealing with PISA ransomware. So extension on all the encrypted files was PYSA, protect your systems, amigo. So after we saw that, kind of funny. It's funny now.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, at the time probably less.
Wasn't funny at the time.
Yeah. So what's actually when a town gets ransomware? Like, some people might be thinking, well, if everyone in your office is kind of given the day off and they just can't log in, but I believe the impacts were quite broad ranging in the area.
I think one of the more challenging things is, again, this was in the middle of a pandemic. So you had a remote workforce that now could no longer operate, and not even, with the factors of that, just like trying to be on site and work now was obliterated. So, we live in a community that, took COVID very seriously too. So you've got this staff that does not want to get within 6 feet of people. And now they don't have an endpoint that works, and there wasn't really any kind of incident response plan. So, a lot of mistakes were made that I think made recovery much harder than it should have been even. So one of those things, so like Logan, he's got a sticker on the back of his laptop that says, in case of cyber attack, pull cables. And, because that was, we thought, kind of like one of the funny outcomes of this, like, seems logical, right, to start pulling cables to stop the spread. But, if you understand the way these threat actors work, the spread's already happened by the time they're, actions on objectives. So, it just made recovery and forensics and a lot of things much harder than it should have been. And did I miss anything? I mean, what was your lens?
No, yeah. I mean, it just made it super difficult for everyone. It pretty much sent like our police department, our building department back to pad and paper, basically, which was super tough for them. So, and we can't just, like you said, we can't just send everyone home for the day, because all that stuff, people are still coming into the town hall to get permits, and people are still calling the police department because they got issues. So you just have to keep going. But it was a nightmare for sure.
Yeah, that was crazy, man.
And how long was that kind of cable pulling panic phase? How long did that go on for before, you started to form a plan as to what you were going to actually do about this?
It was actually a relatively long. So the cable pulling, all that stuff happened like in the middle of the night before I had gotten there in the morning. But because there was just so little of an actual plan for what to do in this instance, the kind of panic mode uncertainty thing went on for, honestly, probably a few weeks. And then at some point, the decision was made to actually bring in a consultant to act as a CISO to help kind of guide steer the ship. And then at that point, there was a plan, and we were able to start rolling with recovery.
Yeah, that I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying, because I like even in normal scenarios, you think of like security or IT resiliency, and like you're doing tabletops, right? And you're like, well, what if this happens? And the most classic example of like, we have backups of our we have backups of our data, but has anybody ever tried to restore it? And like, there's all those things, but like, yeah, just going back to that period of time where it's just like, even if you have the well-laid plan and you tabletop and whatever, and then like, there was probably no tabletop on like, and there's a pandemic, right? Because it's like, that's not like the thing you throw in. And I think that's the thing that's always I was saying this to somebody the other day. There was some stuff that happened in our industry with the EDR vendor or whatnot, which we can't talk about with you guys. But anyways, like there's these like curveballs that happen, and so like I think one of the most important things is not just like what are all your plans and stuff, but like when you think of like people, right? Because you're gonna have curveballs, and sometimes the difference of like can you handle what comes as a curveball or not, like really ends up coming down to people. And I know in the way that like you've gestured and spoken to a few times, Chris, with like Logan, is like Logan, you're one of those type of people, obviously, man, where it's like there is going to be the curveballs, and you're gonna sort it out and step up. And I think that's part of why we try to do this podcast and talk about like the actual stories and what people are going through, right? Because all technology, all plans, all things aside, comes down to people. And but I'll let you get back to the story. I just wanted to compliment you on that, my dude.
Yeah, thank you. And I was gonna say, like, one of the things too that I think in planning that could be super huge is like remove one of the tools that you rely on while you're going through that tabletop, and then see how you'd react. Because in this instance, like, there was a backup solution with offsite recovery set up that should have been able to allow us to recover, but it wasn't designed properly. There was a lot of things wrong with it, and so it got completely destroyed. So the first thought, on day one was, cool, we have these two sets of, not one, but two sets of backups. Let's just recover. And, they just got completely destroyed. And that pretty much crippled the whole plan, because that was the plan. So I think it's key too, like, even if you're an organization that's pretty mature and has like some great tools, like good backups and all these things, I think it's key to think about, well, what would happen if something went down and I lost one of those? Like, how bad would that be for me? And it was really bad for the town in this instance. So
absolutely. So where in the timeline you guys are now? It sounds like somebody was in consulting. You're starting to do recovery, and then like where do you kind of cross in, Chris? Like, at what point were you coming in? I'll say everybody's trying to mature things. So just how'd that happen?
Yeah, so like I think just a couple things to add there. So like the town's fully down, right? The public cannot access basic things, permitting. Police are down. Like it's super disruptive. And decisions were made to like go to Gmail accounts from, Microsoft. And so now there's a bunch of confusion and people aren't quite sure where to go for anything. And, the town had engaged a third-party resource through their cybersecurity insurance vendor. And that third-party resource was like, totally protecting the insurance company and not at the best heart of the town. And so it's like, what's the easiest way to get them to passable grade? And, from there, they made a good decision, and they brought in a pretty good company to begin the recovery effort. But I would say, again, like, they really stacked the chips, and it was super expensive. I mean, for a small town, $1.2 million on software and hardware to get started again is no small chunk of change. So I think anybody could have done it with that much money. Good solutions were brought to the table, though, a good EDR, a good firewall, good backup and recovery solution, that kind of thing. And, and then setting up things like MFA, stuff like that. And so I came on board roughly 6 months after that. So I went, I had to get backgrounded and that kind of thing, but was pretty knowledgeable, I feel like, of what I was walking into. But was pleasantly surprised. And I think for me, again, like I will put Logan on a pedestal at any opportunity that I can. And I'm sure any company in the world would love to have him, but he is deserved because of what he brought to the table, not only before the attack, but after. And I think the two things that I want to say to that, Logan really had an opportunity to stand up this infrastructure with the help of the vendor. So he really understands like current state, which was really nice to walk into, and then just the other part of, again, like having his background and the town investing in him to make sure that it was a success doing that. So like at the time, Logan got a handful of certifications and other things that really took him to the next level. And when they were interviewing, for my position at my panel, they had mentioned that they were going to be hiring an analyst. And I asked them, please don't. I said, let me get in. Like, I really want to be able to pick my team. Like, it's important for the recovery that I have the opportunity to get to do that. And, my boss now, she was like, no, we got the right person and it's going to be an internal promotion. And I was like, okay, internal, that's fine. Like, we can work with that. And so like I came in and, Logan was here doing the thing. And then we had talked a little bit, Marc, but like really my strategy coming in was interview as many people as possible to understand current state. So I got in, and probably the first 3 weeks I was at the town, I interviewed 26 people, but that's like a quarter of our town. We don't have, we have like 160 people if you don't count seasonals. So, and I asked the same basic questions of everybody, and I've been asking those same 10 questions, annually here to kind of see where we're at, so that we have performance-driven metrics. And, our town surveys that we send out, always the same questions, kind of general, so that we kind of can understand that. And from that, I built out, I did a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? That helped drive our annual work plan and helped drive our strategic recovery. One of the things that we landed on, this being a Beyond Trust podcast, one of the biggest challenges we had were like remote agencies that have VPN access to our network. That becomes opportunity for like supply chain problems. They had devices, where they could be installing their own things and then have direct network access to our things. So, through that SWOT and through like the strategic recovery planning, that became one of the things that we focused on, was like, how do we get to a better state with that so that we can stop the bleeding, make sure that we don't have another incident.
And we don't often get like kind of CISO and they're all practitioners in their own way, but we don't often get the kind of pair like you guys. So not to get all Barbara Walters, et cetera. But when you think of for yourself, Logan, right? When you think about Chris as like a security leader and coming in and like I think the thing that's always interesting is there's both as the security leader, what's the sort of people that you're trying to hire, culture you're trying to build, et cetera. And then, for a lot of us, you're also kind of selecting like, well, what kind of boss do I want? What type of leader do I want to work for, and all these things. And so not to put you on the spot, which means I'm going to put you on the spot. How do you think about Chris in terms of like, what you love about his like style of leadership? You guys obviously have like a rad relationship that I think is infectious, if I can say it that way. So I'm just kind of curious, because I think it's important for other security leaders to hear from somebody like yourselves on like, things that work, things they should emulate, etc.
Yeah. I mean, there's a million things I could say about Chris. He's incredible as a leader for our team, and just as kind of like the person making decisions for the town as far as security goes. But I think just first impressions were extremely impressive. I actually got to sit on the interview panel, and he came in here and knew more about the town than I think half the employees know about the town. And he like came in and immediately pointed out some security improvements that we could make just from literally going to our website and then like walking through the building to get to his interview. And so that really stuck out to me. And then, once he got in here, it was just very obvious that like, first of all, Chris is like very upfront and honest about everything, which I think is huge as a leader. It just makes it to where we can all work together so well and have such a great relationship here in this department. And then also, Chris is like really not afraid to do the hard thing, because in the long run, it's going to make things better, because previously, here and other places, there were a lot of decisions that were made that I felt like were kind of the easy way out. Like, we can't do that because it's going to be difficult and our users aren't going to appreciate it and all this stuff. And what I really think separates Chris from a lot of people is he looks at it from a much like more long distance approach. Like, what is going to be the best for the town long term? It might not make us the favorite today, but it's going to ultimately make things a lot better. And we've been able to accomplish a lot in the last year that is like with that methodology in mind. And we've seen incredible improvements here. So I think, those are a few of the things that are just,
I love one of the last things you were saying, Logan, of like, that Chris is basically trying to, don't shy away, like attack the hard problems, like do the work that matters. Right. And I think that's like such an important thing because, I think a lot of the, greatest people that I ever think of, leading different teams and having folks on my teams, like that, it just attracts the right talent, right? Because like, it's one in the hand of, I think, some of the best practitioners in our space and other things, right? Like they are the people that I'm like, no, put me into the hard task, right? Like I want to do the stuff that matters. I want that hard problem. It's the most rewarding thing. And so it's cool to see that back and forth with you guys.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say too is that Chris is also super technical, which is a little, it can be unusual for like a CISO or those level of positions. And he's like on it. So it makes it so we can have really good, conversations as a team. And he fully understands like way more than I do a lot of the time. And so I think that's another thing too, like having that technical aspect, even as in a leadership position, has been like incredible.
It must be, like the technical aspects and skills that you both bring are really impressive. But when you're dealing with, downtime for the local police force, permitting, all those kind of things, how did the townsfolk react? What was the like PR exercise you had to go through we need to spend this amount of the town's money. This is the reason things are down. You'll have to bear with us. How did you go through that process?
I don't know if that was performed as best as it could have been or communicated as best as it could have been, but I can tell you now, really our goal is to partner really well with our emergency operations team. So like we had a pretty mass outage. We were impacted by an EDR company recently, and that mass outage, we had pretty much had an incident response plan in place. We knew how the communication flow needed to go, and we knew at what point it stopped being an IT problem and started being a town problem. And so like we worked with our emergency operations team, and we made sure that they became the incident command so that we could be hands on keyboards and focus on the task at hand. And they then, determine if it's worthy of going out, to our public information officer to disseminate information to the public or not. And I think that that's a really good path for us. I've definitely been in the opposite where it seems like IT is supposed to do everything. And I don't know if that's really the best methodology because you're pulling some of your best decision makers off the problem at that point.
And in that recovery process, people are also bearing with you while you're doing these things. You mentioned at the start, there was those mistakes made where people panicking, pulling cables, and obviously start resetting passwords, deleting users. What was the longer term impacts on the recovery, the forensics from some of those early actions?
I mean, Logan can speak to this, but forensics were not an option. I mean, the town, like my briefing was like, hey, bud, so we're starting over, and there wasn't a lot of information there. The FBI actually just called us and offered some of our gear back. And we just thought it was bad juju if they couldn't figure out the forensics on it. We didn't know if we stood a chance. So we said, go ahead and keep it. What is your...
Yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it. Pretty much what I shared already today is all the info that we have. And that's just from my experience, from pulling info from help desk tickets to find dates and stuff like that. Like there's just not, we just lost a lot of the forensics, and it made it so it's difficult for us to give out any useful information to help future people that run into this stuff. So that was kind of a bummer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you guys were talking a little bit earlier about like leadership and stuff. And I just want to impart like two things that have worked for me. And maybe if somebody's listening, it may resonate with them. And those two things are this: I really believe in not leading in fear. And I think the biggest fear in the corporate world is that people will leave. So if you train them, if you get them certified, if you promote them, if you talk well about them to others, the fear is that that person will then have more opportunities and there's more opportunity for them to leave. And I really just want to challenge that thinking. I think it's a very immature way to act. I think you want to promote your team when worthy. Like, don't give false praise, but when you have good people on your team, you should invest in them, right? Like, I don't trust a consultant to come into our business and know what Logan could know. I'd rather take that same time and give Logan, a week or two off to go to SANS training and come back as a better analyst. And, through opportunity, if things happen, that's great. But like, shouldn't we be leaders in this process and this community? And like, even if your staff does leave, don't you want a good name? Like, and so like, that would be my encouragement, because people will shift around no matter what you do. So I think it's just really a good place to have a good heart and to promote that kind of behavior, because then at that point too, you're not selling the why. Like, I don't have to tell Logan why we need to do things, right? He knows why we need to do things. Matter of fact, he creates the whys. Like, he'll come to me and say, like, we should be doing this, right? And like, this is real easy for us to move the ball forward. And, I think that's just a better place to be. And then just the second part, every HR training you go to is going to say you need to approach a situation head on. If somebody does something that you don't like that day, you need to tell them, no standing on the desk or whatever it is, right? That's probably not the best example, but I completely disagree with that. I think that good decisions and good culture are made by sleeping on it. And so like, most of my time in leadership, when one of my staff members has done something or said something that I didn't quite align with, I've made a commitment to myself to go home, sleep on it. And if it still bothers me the next day, like if it's going to put us at risk or something like that, then we have that conversation. And I can tell you 90% of the time, I don't. It's like, it's just not worth it. Like, save those conversations for when they really matter. It's kind of like, the parents that scream at their child all the time. It's like, dude, like, chill. Like, save the screaming for when they're running into the road. They didn't put their toys away. That's not an appropriate time to start, making somebody miserable. So, from a leadership position, that would just be the things that I would encourage, especially the young leaders of today, is if you want to have staff that will follow you into battle and, you be willing to follow them into battle, maybe don't lead in fear and, maybe sleep on it.
Love that, dude.
Absolutely fantastic advice there. I think, that's just such a good thought that, a lot of people, they're just the natural tendency is to micromanage and try and make decisions, especially, when, like yourself, you're in a position where a lot of the technical aspects of the role, but sometimes you've just got to decide, what actually really matters there. So I think that's fantastic advice. And Logan, from your side, you've obviously gone through the ringer here. You did the newly married pandemic ransomware outbreak. You probably spilled coffee down your shirt that same day. You had everything going wrong at once. If someone else is in that position where they're an IT technician, they're in a very small team, suddenly they think something's going wrong. They've been hit by ransomware, or they think there's an incident about to happen. What would you say to them? What should they be thinking and doing?
I think the two things that really worked out well for me is, first of all, you can't ignore things. Even if you've got somebody who is maybe above you in your organization or something telling you that it's not a big deal or not to worry about it, it's not worth it to ignore it, because you're just going to create so much more work for everyone, yourself, these people, the rest of the organization. So you really can't ignore anything. I mean, we now look into every alert that we get all the time. Like, it's just, you have to. And then I think the other thing too is there was a lot of feelings, I think, at some point to where, like, you feel like when you're a technician, you can't be working on like higher level things. But I would say you definitely, depending on what base skill set you have, you definitely can. Like, even when I was a technician, I was at the very beginning helping rebuild domain controllers and do all sorts of these really technical things. And it was just because I kind of knew enough to know that was the right next step, and I was willing to put in the work to do it. And so I would say definitely there's a lot of hesitation sometimes to work on things like that, but don't be afraid to like step into that next level of technicality and start start investigating and working all that stuff.
Yeah, someone once told me that the thing to do is be relentless but respectful. If you see something and you think you need to shine a light on it, you don't necessarily need to just drop it, but you need to not just be screaming you're an idiot about it. You need to approach it in a professional way and, build the evidence, build the case, keep highlighting the things. So I think that's absolutely fantastic advice there. And, we've got a lot of organizations out there who may be feeling that they're suffering from resourcing shortages, budget shortages. They've got, areas that they know that they're vulnerable. So I don't know if either of you have any guiding principles or words of advice to help people be able to focus their efforts and maximize their impact and their value to the business.
I'll maybe start there. I would say you don't need a lot of people. You need the right people. That's where I would start. And when you have the right people, invest in them. It's a lot less expensive than hiring a lot of different people or consultants that maybe aren't, as in tune with your environment. And I think that goes well. And then Marc had said it earlier, like when you do get people, get curious people. Like Logan, for example, you can derive whatever you want, whether you think we paid or not. But Logan created a decryption engine as a technician to start to help with the restoration services. And again, that speaks to that curiosity of him, going online and figuring out, how are we going to do this? We can't do this one by one. We need to figure out a way to get our environment back. And I just find that highly impressive. And those are the type of people that you want. You want the people that aren't just kind of sitting around waiting for, someone else that's outside of your organization to tell you what to do. Logan brought it to the table, had the idea, showed his proof of concept, and then they moved forward. And it helped, push the recovery forward.
Nice. And if people, we're starting to run out of our time here, and it's been a fantastic conversation. I think we could probably go for another episode at least on this. But if people are out there, they want to know more about you guys or the town of Truckee and what goes on over there, where's the best place to find that information out?
Logan, what do you think? I think probably because again, we are the town of Truckee. I think the probably the easiest way to kind of look into some of the things that we're doing or to reach out to us is to connect on LinkedIn. That's probably the best. We put some of the information out there. We're government, so we're not in the space of trying to sell services or things like that. So most of what we have out there is only really what we want people to know. But you'll probably catch us at a lot of security things. You'll catch us at a lot of different conferences. You'll catch us in the wild, I think, a bit. We're on a lot of different forums and stuff like that because we stay curious. We're invested in making sure that we, are current, and that's hard to do in cyber. Any other thoughts?
No, yeah, I think that's what I would have said too.
Awesome. Marc, do you know any final thoughts from your side? Because I know you've done a lot of conversations with these guys.
I could do a million security thoughts, keep chatting with you guys. I actually, unrelated to technology, I will do the sales pitch of go check out the town of Truckee. I'm an avid, love the outdoors, love adventure, love backpacking. There is no better jumping off point for all that. I think it's one of the hidden gems that more people need to know about, not just in California, but elsewhere. If you're visiting the state, make it a point. It's a super, super cool place. And I think you guys not only what represent a lot of what I love about great security practitioners, but I think you guys well represent the town, the culture, the reason that people should go check it out. And super stoked. I know sharing stuff like this is not something everybody always does. Really appreciate because I think it's extremely helpful for the community and our ability to kind of learn from each other. So yeah, just super stoked. And I will get up there at some point, so go hit a trail. But look forward to the next conversation, man.
We'd love that.
Cool.
Fantastic. Well, that's unfortunately all we have time for on this episode of Adventures of Alice and Bob. I'd like to profoundly thank our guests here, Chris Hardy and Logan McDonald, for joining us today and sharing their journey, especially those human aspects of the ransomware incident they dealt with. We've got very few people who've dealt with these incidents who are so open about it and transparent like Logan and Chris are. And I know our listeners really appreciate that insight. So thank you very much for that. As always, thanks to super producer Jesse Shirley and the team at Beyond Trust who make this podcast happen. I'm James Maud, and this has been Adventures of Alice and Bob in Truckee, California.